We're on Daf Yudam and Beis on the top line. Rabbi Yehuda Shari Lemishkal Tufrei Lechamra Derech. Rabbi Yehuda was Mekil, and we had discussed something about trimming the hooves of a donkey that runs the mill, runs around and pushes the mill. And Rabbi Yehuda was Mekil. Not only was he Mekil on trimming the hooves, which would enhance the ability of the donkey to grind the flour that we need for yontif, for the Moed, but not only that, he was matir even le'ukme rechaya. And le'ukme rechaya means basically to set up the stones for the mill. So it's not, he's not starting from scratch to create a mill, but you need two millstones, and he's allowed to set up these two millstones, le'ukme, which is to set up. And Rashi says that he places one millstone on top of the other. And the Mishnah allows setting up millstones to assemble it. So we're not actually manufacturing it from zilch, but in the next case, he says that Rabbi Yehuda was lenient even ulemivne amas rechaya. Okay, so once again, he's not building the mill from scratch. Maybe that would be excessive exertion, tircha yisera, but he is building a frame for the mill. And this was an enclosure where the mills would turn around, but they were enclosed in some sort of a barrel. Ulemivne Uriah. Now, Uriah is translated as a barn for cattle or a stable for horses. And if the animal doesn't have a place to protect itself, to rest and so forth, then it might endanger the animal. It becomes injurious to the animal. So therefore, we need this malacha in order to avoid a loss of an animal. You know, an animal is very expensive, like a Rolls Royce. Rav Sharel is Saruke Susyaya. They used to take a metal comb and they used to comb the hair of the horse. And Rav said that they were allowed to do that on Chol Moed. And normally we don't allow on Shabbos or Yontif to do so because he's going to be taking out hairs from the animal. That's almost a psik. But in the case of a horse on Chol Moed, since it's mitzarchei Moed, because he rides the horse on the Moed, and he wants the horse to look presentable, so you're allowed to spiffy up the horse by combing its hair. Now that's one pshat in Rav. I don't know of another pshat, but in the second case, Rav permitted lemivne akarpita. Here we have one pshat that this is a wooden bench, to build a wooden bench. Another pshat here is to build, again, some sort of perhaps a stable for the animal. Ulemivde itztaba, to build a stone bench, and all this is permissible in Chol Moed because of Tzarchei Moed. Now, the Gemara talks now about health issues with relationship to animals and bloodletting of animals. And these are a series of rulings by Rava. And they pertain not only to health, but also to Chol Moed. For example, Rava permitted lemishkal dama, to bloodlet, lebehema, an animal, bechul demoed, on Chol Moed. And bloodletting, which is certainly prohibited as one of the 39 malachas, it comes under Netilas Neshama, Hotzaz Dam, and yet he's going to allow this, Rava, on Chol Moed. And the Gemara is going to try to support Rava from a Brisa. Now, we spoke earlier about Rav's Kula Lemivne Akarpita and Mivne Itztaba. And it would seem that this is, according to the Mishnah Berurah, only a Meleches Hedjot. It's not a Meleches Uman. You don't require professional skills to make this bench. Even amateur skills would be sufficient. And the reason for that is because although with regard to food will be mekil with tzarchei moed, even in a meleches uman, but with regard to a bench for sitting on, that's not on the same level as food, and therefore we're going to require that it be a meleches hedjot. Tanya Amar Abaye, Amar Abaye, Tanya Misailach, I have a brisa to support you. Mekizin dam lebehema. We're allowed to do bloodletting from an animal on Chol HaMoed. V'yein monim b'fuah lebehema b'chol HaMoed. We don't withhold any sort of medicinal, applying medicinal treatment for the sake of an animal, because the loss of an animal is considered a hefsed, and it's a davar avud, which is mutar on Chol HaMoed. Furthermore, Rava Shara lekaskuse kirmi. Again, there's a lot of Aramaic here, because we're getting into the nitty-gritty details of what you're allowed to do on Chol HaMoed, what you're not. So now we're talking about pressing clothing, otherwise known in Hebrew as gihutz. And when you have certain materials that are made of more sophisticated, the garments that are made of more sophisticated materials, it's called a krum because it's very thin. And apparently pressing, or what we might call ironing clothes, does not require a maisa uman, professional skill. It's a matter of amateur skill, of maisa hedja. And therefore you're allowed to press clothing on Chol HaMoed for the benefit of wearing these clothing on Chol HaMoed. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ami, Amar Rav Chizda, Kiture bire asir. My time of maisa uman. So even though pressing or ironing is not called a maisa uman, it's a maisa hedjot, but kiture bire is a maisa uman. Now, what is this all about? He says that we're talking about pleating, P-L-E-A-T, pleating a sleeve. So we're talking about something that requires a maisa uman, and even if it's tzarchei hamoed, it's prohibited. Then we get back to Rava. Amar Rava, man de misakel ara. So he removes obstacles from the land. Let's say, for example, there are mounds of earth in a field, and he's allowed to remove them on Chol HaMoed. Now, with regard to what we discussed until now, we had Rava being Mekil. Now we're beginning to enter into a different kind of a kula of Rava, and that's improving land or providing some other need. And there's a discussion about this in another sugya in Baba Basra Daf Nun Dalit. Shmuel discusses these situations, whether the action is allowed or not. So, for example, he was talking in the context of improving the land as a Masechet Kinyan to demonstrate that you acquired ownership over the land. And that's a Masechet Kinyan to improve the land. And here Rav is discussing the same situation of improving the land, whether it's permitted on Chol HaMoed or not as far as Kinyanim is concerned. If he intended to improve the land, then it's going to be forbidden on Chol HaMoed, which would have made it into a Kinyan as far as Karka is concerned. But if he is not intending to improve the land, but other purposes to provide for a festival need, then Rav was making. And that's what it says over here. Adaiti the Beibari. If he wants to create a threshing floor, and therefore he's going to be able to thresh his grain on Chol Moed, that makes it into Tzarchei Moed. Shari, it's mutter. But Adaiti the Ara, if he's only preparing the land for cultivation, so he's improving the land, which would be again a kinyan according to Shmuel Bava Basra, but here it's also just the reverse. It's also because since he wants to sort of like plow the field or improve the field, that you're not allowed to do on Chol Moed. Heichi Dami, what's a case where we'll see whether or not he wants to make a threshing floor or perhaps improve the land for cultivation? How do we go about determining what exactly is the purpose of his activity, whether it's mutter or asa on Chol Moed? And the Gemara differentiates mulya b'mulya or nitza b'nitza. So if he digs a mound and he puts dirt on top of the mound, or if he digs a hole and then he puts the dirt into the hole, is then adaiti the beidari. We see clearly that he's intending to make it a threshing floor, and then it would be mutter. However, in contrast, shakal mulya v'shada binsa, if he took a mound and threw the dirt into a hole, then it appears that his work on the ground is for the purpose of improving the land, and then it's us. So if one took dirt from the top of a mound and he placed it next to what remains on the mound, creating in effect a level, lower and wider mound, then it's apparent that he only means to level a small area of the field for purposes of threshing, and he's going to prepare a small amount of wheat, which he needs for Yont. If he dug around the border of a hole, put the dirt inside the hole, creating in effect a level, shallower, and wider hole, it is evident that he meant only to level a small area for threshing, and therefore it's mutter. On the other hand, if he removed the mound completely, used the dirt to fill a hole, effectively leveling a wide expanse of land, then it is evident that his intention is to level the field for purposes of cultivation, because it's easier to plow level ground, and therefore it's us. The Omar Rav, this I believe is number 4. Haiman de Zochi Ziche. Adaiti de Tzive Shari, Adaiti de Ara Asur. So he's got weeds and twigs, all sorts of debris in a parcel of land. He wants to clear it off. If he clears it for the purpose of gathering wood for fuel, that's mutter, because he needs to feed his fire. So these weeds and twigs will help feed his fire for food. But if he's clearing it for the intention of improving the land for cultivation, it's also hechi dami. How do we determine what his intention is? Shakil ravavevach shavik zutre adaiti ditzive. If he takes only large twigs, leaving out the small ones, then apparently he's gathering wood. But shakal ravave vizutre, if he takes the large and the small ones, then he's clearing the debris and preparing the land for cultivation, adaiti di ara, and therefore it's us. Now we're up to number 5. Yom Rava, Haiman de Pasach Mayod li Are. He opens a gate for water to run into his land on Chol Moed. And we've discussed in the past that in general, when you irrigate a field, then there may be certain situations where it's mutter. Here, he has a specific intention. His intention is not to improve and irrigate the field, but rather adaite de kavre, he's catching fish. And he wants to eat these fish on Yontif. Again, later on we'll see, is he gathering together too much fish that it's not even possible to eat that volume of fish? But in any event, he has this intention to bring river water that has fish in it, put it into a deep pit, let the water drain out into the field, leaving the fish behind inside this depressed area. And sorry, then he's doing it for food. But Adaiti Diara, if the reason why he's opening a gate for water to run into his field is to irrigate the land, asir, that's prohibited. Echidami, and how will we figure out one way or the other what his intention is? Pasach trei bavi. If he opens two gates for the water, chad mi loy v'chad mi tatoi, one on a higher level and one at a lower level, adaiti de kavri, then he's trying to catch the fish. And what happens is he lets water into the depression on top, lets it drain out into the field lower down, leaving the fish behind in the depression. But pasach chad bav, if he only opens one single gate, an inlet at a higher elevation than adaiti diara, it would be apparent that he's interested in irrigating the land. And that's forbidden on Chol Moed. He says basically in this case, he's going to allow the water to accumulate in the depression until it overflows, spreading out over the entire field. Whereas in the case of two gates, the field is watered only in the place where the water drains out of the depression. And there he's obviously trying to catch the fish. In the last case, it's also, even though a portion of the field is inevitably watered, but that's exactly it. If he's inevitably watering the field, it seems like that. Now, in the case where he opens both gates, he's also inevitably watering the field. But it's mutter, because we see that he's motivated to open the gates in order to catch fish for Sarchei Moed. Watering the field is an unintentional outcome of that which is mutter. Number 6, V'yomar Rava, Haiman de Pashach Dikla. He removes branches from a palm tree on Chol Moed. If it's Adaiti de Chevasa, if he's trying to get food for the animals, and he's going to feed them from the branches of a palm tree, sure, he's allowed to do that. As we discussed before, it's mutter to obtain food for your animal on Chol Moed. Adaiti de Dikla, but if he's trying to improve the palm trees, doing a kind of a zomer, is asur. And once again, the Gemara is going to ask, hey chidami, how do we know what his intention is? Shakil kula mechad gisa. If he removed the branches from only one side of the tree, then adaite de chivasa. All right, he wants to feed his animals, but mehai gisa, adaite de dikla. The aser, if he was pruning the palm tree in order to improve its productivity, then he would clearly remove the branches from both sides of the tree, from this side and from that side. And once having indicated by doing so that he's interested in improving the tree, it's aser on Chol Moed. Now, which branches is he taking off the tree if he's taking from both sides and he's zomer? The answer is there are dry branches. The Amar Rava, number 7, Hani Tamre Tuchlone. So we're talking about unripe dates. Migzarinu Shari. But Mitzaininu Asir. Maitzinu Asir. So what's going on here? If we have to determine if he's cutting these dates to eat them, again, they're unripe grapes. dates. If it's for the purpose of eating them, maybe he'll wait a few hours until they mature, because right now they're unripe. Then it's mutter, because he's preparing it for food. But if he's pressing these dates under weights, that's something else. He's drying these dates and he puts them under weights to extract their liquid so they should not become wormy in the interim. And Rava prohibits pressing the dates on Chol Moed because he's obviously interested in preparing these dates for use after Yontif, after the Moed. He's making them, he's preparing them to become dried fruits. Rav Papa Omar Keva de Mislai. Rav Papa has a different perspective here. He's worried about the dates becoming wormy if you don't press them. And although Rava had prohibited pressing them, because that's for post-yontif use, Rav Papa says, no, we have a davar ovid here because he's got to press them, otherwise they're likely to become wormy, and they're not worth a thing. And therefore, let's equate it, says Rav Papa, ke prakmatya ovid, Domi, that's what's similar to Vikshari. You know, if you're going to suffer a loss, if you don't sell your merchandise right now, and although, again, usually selling merchandise is asar chom, but not in the case of a davar avud. And here, if the bugs will attack the dates, that's a davar avud. They're wormy. It's worthless. It's interesting that the Gemara uses the language kiprakmatya ha'avud dami v'shari. It doesn't just say prakmat davar avud. You know? Maybe the Gemara is trying to say that even if it's a small monetary loss, it's still permissible. The Amar Rava, it's number 8. Prakmatya kolchu asu. Merchandising is prohibited on Chol Moed. There's too much effort involved. Buying merchandise involves effort and carefully appraising the value of the purchase. And that's going to be monea. It's going to prevent him from simchas yontiv. Also, sometimes he might overpay and he'll be distressed about that. But minor buying and selling would have been permitted. But yet, according to Rava, the Chachamim asered any merchandising on Chol Moed. Because once you're going to permit case A, where it's a minor commercial transaction, inevitably he's going to do it next time with a greater and greater involvement in heavy-duty commerce. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Ovin ubedavra avud mut. That even though merchandise as a general rule is prohibited, we don't buy merchandise because it involves great effort, etc. He may be depressed if he doesn't get his price and so forth and so on. But nevertheless, in a case, says Rabbi Yossi, where he'll suffer a financial loss if he doesn't sell his merchandise on Chol Moed, he's permitted to sell it to avert and protect himself against such a financial loss. So this sugya seems to indicate, at least the way we presented it in the name of Rashi, actually, that when we talk about davar ovid, it means a loss of potential profit. That itself qualifies as a davar ovid. Now, if we compare that to the Gemara back on the phase, that the kulos in a case of irretrievable loss apply only to threaten loss of capital, but not the loss of potential profit. Now, how do we reconcile that with our Gemara here, which seems to assume that even loss of potential profit is considered a davar avud? He quotes here the Ravid in this note, and he says the following. Where one seeks to permit the performance of actual labor, then we're going to be machmir back on the base if it's only to lose potential profit, which is called reva. However, if we're talking about selling merchandise where there's no actual physical labor, just it's unnecessary, the rabbis were more lenient with regard to commerce, permitting it even to forestall a mere loss of potential profit. Minias reva. Tosfos disagrees with this shita. Divar masel ubedova. Tosfos says, "V'yafsid min hakeren, aval im lo yafsid min hakeren el shelo yarviach, ein zeh choshev davar av." Very important, Tosfos. Ravina havileahu iska. Ravina was involved in certain merchandise. He was doing business. He was selling at a price of 6,000 zuz. It's a major sum of money. He wanted to wait to sell it until after Chol Moed, and he was blessed by Hashem. And it sold for 12,000 zuz. Waited to sell it till after Chol. So basically, Derech HaTeva really risked losing a substantial amount of money. Ravina avimasik zuze b'bnei akra d'shanvasa. Ravina had a claim against the people of Shanvasa. Also, Lakami Deravasi, Amalei, Maule Mezel Ha'idna Life. Am I allowed to go today, Chol Moed, and demand payment? Amalei Rav Ashi replies to Ravina, Kaven Ha'idna Hu de Mishtachas Lahu. The Yomi Achrini lo meshchachaslu ki prakmatio de avidami v'shari. You can find them today. You can collect them your money today. On another day, maybe you won't be able to find it. It's therefore this is a case of a davar of malacha, like prakmatio ha'ovid, and therefore it's mutter. Anya nami gabi avodah zarki I gavna. We have an analogous ruling with regard to avodah zarah, olchim, which means it's permissible. Liyarid shel akum. Okay, we're now on the top of Daf Yud Aleph. It means there's a marketplace and a fair in which the Ovdei Kocham Mazos are selling merchandise, and you're allowed to participate in that fair. And usually, with regard to a commercial fair conducted by idol worshippers, it's a bit of a problem here, because if the idol worshipper gets profit and he's successful, he starts praising his gods and everything. We don't want to get involved in such things. But v'lochim behema avodim u'shvachos batim sodos ukramim. V'kosev umala barchos shalahem mipnei shu kematzil miyodna. Again, we're going to allow you to go to your rid of Ovei Kachavim in order to purchase merchandise at a slash price, because otherwise you'll lose that opportunity, as we saw before. That makes into Davar Avud. And you're allowed to purchase animals, slaves, shvachos, batim, sodos, kromim, the kosev umalabar choshalahem. And you can record these actions in writing so that you can take them up in court. And now we're talking about secular court. If it's the equivalent of saving one's property from their hands. It's the only way a Jewish buyer could possibly protect himself against the sellers reneging on the transaction. Okay, then this is where we're going to stop for today. We're up to Rav Shara Lechia. Thank you very much.